All right, everybody, we are back with another episode of season 2 of the Afflatus. I'm having a hard time describing today's guest. I mean, where do I begin? She has a Guinness World Record to her name. She founded a non-profit at the age of 13, and she recently published another book. Pavlina Osta is an American radio personality and executive producer for Salem Media Group. Since the young age of 11, Pavlina has been landing her own interviews with the world's top superstars, athletes, and newsmakers on and off the red carpet. In this episode, Pavlina talks about setting a Guinness World Record, her inspiration behind her latest book, and finding a nonprofit at the age of 13. So sit back, relax, and explore the amazing journey of Pavlina Osta. Welcome to the show, Pavlina.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Great. So, what's your story?
Yeah, so I started in radio when I was 11. After I was discovered playing, regular steel drums. I was a street performer. And that radio show quickly became nationally syndicated with over 600 celebrity interviews that I did on location during the show's run by the time I was 18. And then I moved to New York City. I finished my BA in 3 years while working full-time at the Salem Media Group and climbing that corporate ladder, plus being a guest on various media networks as a millennial and Gen Z expert. And I currently have a podcast called If God Had a Podcast. And that's where I interview people who make a better you for a better us. And I have a book that's scheduled to be available this summer. It's going to be like a must read for most motivated millennials and Gen Zs.
Perfect. Yeah, talk about being a rock star. I mean, you have
Thank
covered
you.
all the grounds and you are doing new things and it's good to see all that exciting stuff coming up. So, yeah, that's wonderful. The one thing that really stands out about you when I go to your Instagram profile is that you are a Guinness World Record holder. How did it came to be and who conceptualized it? How was it done? And were you exhausted at the end of it?
Oh, totally. So I interviewed Hunter Hayes at the USTA, Arthur Ashe Kids Day event in New York. And he had just done a Guinness World Record. I think it was like the most performances or something like that. And I was just talking to him about how cool that was. And he was like, you should do one for interviews. And I was like, actually, that'd be really, really cool. So I, that's when I kind of got the idea. And I sort of, I spent about a month getting all the things together, getting the people around, like the team that I needed, because I had to record the whole thing. I contacted the Guinness World Record people. I was just like, okay, what do I need to do in order to break this? What counts as valid or invalid? There's a lot of rules when you're, trying to break a world record. And for me, like I had to have 5 questions that were totally unique. So I wrote up like 2,000 random questions of like, why is the sky blue? But then there were also, more criteria you couldn't just have yes or no answers. They had to be a sentence. So there was a lot of rules that came with that. And it was a lot of planning, a lot of teamwork, getting everyone, making sure that the recording was going the whole entire time and submitting that on time and everything. And yeah, so it was honestly, I wasn't that tired afterwards. I definitely slept afterwards. But I think the whole time I was just so high on adrenaline that it was, I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel anything except I need to get this done, So, and I was 14 at the time. So, yeah, it was definitely an experience.
I can't imagine, going through that much effort and that kind of planning.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, props to you for doing that and, putting the idea of interviewing people up on the map with Guinness World Records. How did your education play a role in helping you develop a career?
Yeah, I don't think my education really did much for my career itself, just because I had already been so involved in my career already. In my mind, school was more of a piece of paper that I had to get at the end of the day. But I definitely think it played a bigger role as with me growing as a person. College was a pretty dark time for me, so I learned a lot about myself, and I kind of found my voice during that time, but I don't think it really did anything for my career besides, saying that I have um, a degree.
Right. Yeah, I think that happens a lot with people who get into their respective careers very early on, or, for example, sports people or athletes, when they take up running or basketball or baseball very early in their life, then school just becomes, as you said, a way to kind of get a piece of paper, and the real
Yeah.
focus always kind of is on what they're doing. But I think now that's true for a lot of actors as well. Now there are acting schools, so a lot of people get professional training and they learn with their mentors and other people. But because I'm a filmmaker, I see more and more people do that. But I think when I was growing up in India, I saw people just kind of like, getting into it because of their talent. And
Mhm.
then the learning and workshopping kind of came later on when they wanted to grow.
Sorry, I
So
think it's important to have a well-rounded, liberal arts education, like learn about philosophy, all that fun stuff. But going to a trade school is, I think, the best option. It's usually a lot cheaper than going to a university, and I think it saves you a lot of time because you're already around people that are doing what they want to do, and you're right in that field already. Whereas in college, I think a lot of people kind of get lost. And then you have all this debt afterwards, and it's like, what did you really accomplish? You know what I mean? And I think there's the statistic is 80% of people that, say they have a degree in engineering or something go into something completely different. So it's just like, well, why did you get that degree? So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think trade schools are kind of the best option.
I have this joke with my other engineering friends that engineering schools are usually just 4 year long period for you to discover that you want to do acting or modeling or something.
Yeah, I could see it.
It's just like preparing you for how to audition for these things, and you are not really focusing on what engineering is teaching you.
Right.
Um, what's your definition of happiness?
In my opinion, happiness is synonymous with gratitude. I don't think you can really be happy if you're not, thankful for everything that you have and where you are in life. Every day I sort of tell myself it's kind of like a meditation that I'm thankful for my body, that I can move. I'm thankful that I can see the beauty in the world, that, how far I've come. I'm excited about the future. Happiness isn't about getting what you want all the time. I think it's more or less being like thankful for what you have and learning from the experiences, even if it was a bad experience. Like you can, come out and see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, so I would make it synonymous with gratitude, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. And I think gratitude is one of those unspoken things that kind of adds value to your personality no matter what you are doing. And that makes you sort of more relatable with people around you. And they
Hmm.
can see that difference. The person who is not grateful for what they have in their life or what they're doing is always kind of, in a bad mood, passive aggressive, always
Yeah, they're
complaining.
very like pessimistic. They never see like the bright side of things, and it's just like, what a sad life to live. Honestly, I think that must be so depressing. Because I used to think that way. I used to like wake up every day and hate wherever I was in my career because it just wasn't good enough and all this other stuff. And I just think it's a waste of time. I think it's a waste of energy, and you're not happy. So it's just like, what's the point?
Right. Yeah. And I think, over the years, I've made this decision to kind of consciously distance myself from those people because
That's smart.
they, yeah, they suck out so much energy out of you that you begin doubting yourself, and
Yes.
things that are going right for you then suddenly begin to go wrong. So I've felt that if you surround yourself with people who are positive and pushing you to do better every day, then you are in that great spot where you can be happy as well as keep progressing. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that I do. But yeah, I think very well said. Definition of happiness, if it is equivalent to being grateful, then I think that's a wonderful way to look at life. Speaking of people around us, how have the people around you, like your friends and family, inspired or influenced you?
Oh yeah. So, my mother has always inspired me to do my best and be good, and she's my best friend. So I always want to be better because of her. But I think everything sort of inspires me. I try to be like a sponge and just sort of learn from all the people around me. But yeah.
Yeah, I think family members are really impressionable in that regard, that they can really give you a boost in whatever you're doing, or they can really bring you back. And I've seen both, unfortunately and
Yeah.
fortunately.
I no, I have too. And you know what? I think family members are the ones that, and friends, I think, really close friends, they're the ones that will cut the deepest in you whenever when it's not good. So, and kind of like going back to what you were saying before, having those toxic people around you, cutting them out is the best thing to do for sure.
Is there any person that you turn to from time to time to kind of get an opinion on what you are doing in terms of, let's say, your podcast, or anything else, like life in general? Is there someone like that?
No, not really. I've always just sort of done my own thing. I've always just kind of like had my own path, and no one has really been able to relate to all the things that I've done. And I think like I said, my mom has always been uh my constant supporter, and like whenever I don't know if I'm doing something right, or if I don't know if like something looks okay or whatever it is, I always, send it over to her and I'm like, what are your thoughts on like, do you think this podcast sounds okay? Or do you think this podcast idea sounds okay? But I think at this point, I have built up the confidence to kind of know what it is that I like and what I don't like and that kind of thing. But yeah, I usually just kind of go to my mom for those kinds of things.
How would you say is your creative style different than others? What is your approach towards interviewing people or coming up with ideas?
Yeah, I just really do my own thing. I feel like I just do whatever interests me. If I see an article on someone that's fascinating, I want to talk to them. And I'm usually just kind of drawn to people that are more motivational, entrepreneurial, um, influential. I'm more drawn to them to begin with. But I feel like that's just sort of what I do. I just kind of do whatever interests me, and it all kind of like falls in line.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of bring out your creativity and try different ideas, because there are so many people that are out there that have these amazing ideas, but they are so trapped by their job, or what other people will say, or what will be the outcome,
Hmm.
that their ideas never see the light of the day. And I think if more people sort of just gave wings to their ideas, then I think overall will create more creative content, have more amazing people out there. So the fact that you go out and just explore all these different things, be it writing a book or interviewing people, I think that's really wonderful.
Thank you. I think also people should realize that, maybe you have an idea or you want to start something. Um, you should just realize that you're not going to be good at it in the beginning. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to be the best at interviewing people in the beginning. You're not going to be the best at, starting whatever it is that you're starting. And I think you have to be patient with yourself and just know that you're going to get good. Like when I started my interviews at 11 years old, they were horrible. They're cute, you know what I mean? Just like okay, like this 11-year-old is interviewing these celebrities, but they they weren't great in like an interview context. You know what I mean? Like I didn't have good follow-ups, or all of like the research was there, but it wasn't like fully there because I hadn't developed those skills yet. But just like give yourself time and don't let the haters in the beginning blind you.
And it's interesting you say that, because I recently saw a video of you on a news channel where you were talking about the government in Lebanon
Hmm.
charging money for a free app, which is WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And you were so clear and so articulate and so on to the point that I think it's hard to now imagine that when you must have begun, it was bad. And of course, that's how it is for everyone. And you become better at what you do with time. But
Yeah,
looking at,
especially like doing what we do. It's hard to think on your feet sometimes. It's hard to, especially like when you're doing a TV interview, because I love that interview that you're referring to. But like, there's bright lights in your face and you have to turn a certain way. Like there's so many other things going on that, this guy asking you questions is just adding to the chaos. So stilling your mind is definitely something that you have to learn how to do in all of this. But yeah, it definitely takes time to get better at anything.
Yeah, and I relate with the feeling of like, all the lights and cameras being pointed at you when someone is asking you a question, and it's hard for you to kind of fix your focus in one place and be involved in that. Yeah, I think that's something that people develop with time, and this is going to be a fun question. When was the last time you tried something for the first time?
Oh, snap. Okay. I think it's hard with quarantine and everything, trying things for the first time is difficult since there's not a whole lot to do here. But since the beginning of quarantine, so a couple months ago, I started working on my yoga teaching certification for fun. So I started that for the first time. I started learning French also. That's fun. Um, oh, yesterday I took my first stand-up comedy class, or like I watched a stand-up comedy class to see if I was like interested in doing it. So I guess yesterday.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, stand-up comedy is, so my sister, and this is like a fun little anecdote. My
Hmm.
sister, because I am like this, goofy, crazy person when I'm with my family members, especially with my younger sister, she always points out that, okay, while you are like this with me, why don't you do it on stage behind a mic
Hmm.
and make other people laugh as well? Because I like love all the silly stuff that you do, and you can share that with other people. And although I've never given it a thought, my friends who do stand up comedy have told me that it's one of those things that people make it look easy, but it's
Yeah.
very difficult to
Oh, it's
do.
very hard. And I think one thing, as long as you have timing down, like as long as you like if that's just like naturally in your because like I think a lot of my friends have told me I should do stand-up comedy, and a lot of my like one of my acting coaches, he told me I should do it. My mom has said it multiple times. They're like, why aren't you like this in front of everyone else? And I'm just like, I don't know. It's just I don't know, But I think it because it's like a different side of you. It's a very it's you're just so relaxed in front of your friends and family, like, and when you're around other people, you're like a little bit more put together. But it's definitely a challenge. But I think in natural or like in a normal conversation, if you're like saying something funny, if you have that timing right, that's like the hardest thing to learn apparently in stand-up comedy. So if you have that down, then it's just about writing the jokes, which is still hard. Uh, but as long as you got that first one down, I think you're golden.
Yeah, I think I'll give it a shot. I'll go to a few open mics and see if I'm bombing or like some of my jokes are landing.
Yeah, they definitely say to write about what you know, write about your experiences. If something crazy happens in your family or with one of your friends, like talk about that. So try that.
What kind of impact would you like to see your work have on people?
You ask like really good questions. I want my work to make people think more. I want them to think less about surface level conversations and appearances, materialism. I want, like less time on TikTok and Instagram. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my Louis Vuittons and posting on Instagram and everything, but the motto for my podcast is a better you for a better us. And I really just want people to, um, see that life is hard, but there's so many there's so much joy, and there's, to live in the moment is just such a beautiful thing. And um, I really, Millennials and Gen Zs are known as the anxious, depressed, and lonely generation. And I think that my goal at least is to help change that in some way.
In terms of our generation being lonely and depressed, because
Hmm.
there is another podcast, two podcasts that I'm currently developing. One is on dating and the other one is on relationships.
Hmm.
And you see that, more and more it's like it's becoming increasingly difficult to have meaningful romantic relationships because of this whole hookup culture that we
Yeah,
are
it's
swept up
horrible.
in. And how that is like in contrast with like people in other cultures where they have arranged marriages and they get married like in the early 20s. And it's a fascinating contrast because on one end you don't have time to date anyone, or you don't get to know the other person, you just get married and settle down.
Hmm.
Whereas on the other extreme, you are just like, dating one person upon the other, and you just go through that cycle so many times that you forget to kind of understand, like you don't develop those social coping mechanisms that really help you appreciate the value of another human being.
Absolutely.
um,
And they like it's all about, this whole hookup culture, the dating apps and everything, are it's all about appearances. It's not about your personality. It's not about your interest really. Like you show your interest a little bit on there and everything, but I think for the most part the conversations are extremely dull. Even if you try to engage a little bit more, it's just like there's not much there, and the vulnerability is not there, and it's just like it's hard to it's kind of weird. It's, like I live in New York City, so I'm on one of the dating apps at least, and it's weird to go on the dates because like you're kind of like, I hope you're not like a serial killer. It's just like it's just very odd in my opinion, that we have started to do this, but that's the norm like now. Like, you can't just like walk up to somebody at a bar, like that's considered weird, or that's considered off-putting or something. But I kind of wish we would go back to like the in-person, like asking each other out and stuff, because online and hookup cultures and stuff, it just doesn't really build a deep enough connection.
Before we move to the last question, I came across this information that you founded a nonprofit called Text Year Later.
Mm-hmm.
What is that about? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't have it anymore, but I started that when I think I was like 13 or so, and it was a nonprofit to stop texting while driving, because I think around the age that I was, or around the time that I was 13, that was a huge problem. Everyone was texting and driving, and a lot of people were, dying in car accidents because of it. And I wanted to do something to kind of to help that. And so that's what the nonprofit was for. And I, talked a lot about it, and I brought a lot of awareness to it. And I, since then, that's obviously a long time ago. Since then, that hasn't been a big issue. So I kind of dissolved it. But yeah, I started that when I was a little bit younger.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's great. I think because, to just even have an idea of doing something along those lines and playing a part in solving that problem, I think regardless of how long you had it, it's the intent and the impact that counts, which I feel as like, the other things that you do was a really good idea for you to do. And yeah, I think that's wonderful. And thank you kind of like, for thinking about those things and making difference to people's lives who are affected by this. That brings us to our last question. What's next? What are the exciting ideas or projects that you're working on, and what can the listeners expect from you going ahead?
Most definitely. So I have a book coming out. We are currently picking out the covers and all that exciting stuff, but it's going to be coming out sometime in June. We're thinking like the beginning of June. It's called 20 Things Every Motivated 20 Something Should Know. And I bring in a lot of my celebrity interviews. I talk a lot about obstacles, fear, failures, the imposter syndrome. I bring in a lot of the interviews I did on my podcast, where I interview doctors and I talk about different studies and everything. I bring that into the book. It's a really fascinating, fascinating stuff. And I think a lot of people that are motivated and have that like drive will just love it, because I want them to, feel inspired by it. So that's coming out in June, and that's 20 things every motivated 20 something should know. Um, I have an agent, so we've been working on some rebranding stuff, and then hopefully, a talk show, like a TV talk show, has always kind of been my goal. So we're, every day inching a little bit closer to that. And yeah, so it's just I'm always working on different stuff. Like I started taking acting classes for fun, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, I just kind of do whatever I think is fun.
That's great. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah,
I'm really excited about your book because I'm still in my 20s. And someone who has,
that's what's up.
yeah, someone who has kind of like, gone through like a similar experience, it's always fun for me to read their perspective and understand that how they have lived their life and how they have been able to condense all their experiences into this number of pages. So yeah, I'll be certainly
Hmm.
on the lookout for your book when it releases. So I think, yeah, it's great. And you certainly have the personality and the skills for being a TV show host or being in a movie playing a certain character. So that's really cool and exciting, and it's wonderful to see how you have been constantly working towards developing this diverse skill set. And yeah, if you would like to work in a short film someday, then I might give you a call to audition for a certain character that I feel you would fit.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
I love it.
that would be cool. um but yeah, I think it is so wonderful to see that how you have constantly been growing in your career and serving inspiration for so many people around the world, which certainly includes me. And it's great that I got this opportunity to have a discussion with you and understand your life in a bite size format. So yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope that all your projects become successful and all your dreams come true.
Oh, thank you. You too. I really appreciate it.
Perfect.